Thank you. Thank you very much, Migona, for the invitation. It is a real pleasure to be here. I enjoyed the past couple of days that we had an opportunity to interact with the students and talk about my research. So more today, I would like to share with you about a project that I am leading, and it's called Too Big to Ignore. This is all about small-scale fisheries, and as part of my presentation, I would explain why we want to pay more attention to this particular sector. And I'm calling this talk Transdisciplinary Research for the reason that when we started to get into the details about small-scale fisheries, we recognize very quickly that we need to approach this sector quite differently from what we have been doing before. And transdisciplinary research is actually another way to go about this. And we are in the process still of figuring out how to go about this. So any input and feedback from the audience here would be very helpful for us. So let me start at presenting this a special issue that came out in 2004 that is basically the starting point of that whole discussion about the transdisciplinarity. So as you can imagine that as part of what we do in marine science and oceanography and fisheries and other research, we already embrace this concept of multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary. And all of a sudden, somebody came along and said, we need to be transdisciplinary. What do they really mean? What else do they want us to do? We are already trying hard to be more broad, to be more integrated, and etc. What else do they want us to do? But I think people who talk about this, there are many, I mean, I've been trying to study and understand where they come from, what they're expecting of us. And I think the first sentence in this is actually captures it all. It's a word a la mode. And we have seen a lot of that, word a la mode everywhere. So I think it's more an invitation to start examining and asking difficult questions to what we do. And I think that's a nice way to think about this. So it's about, you know, and I guess we should start from the point that not all science would require transdisciplinary. But for small-scale fisheries research, I think this would be very useful if we can get there. So I basically would skip this in terms of what is transdisciplinary or transdisciplinarity, simply because it's just like many things, it's very difficult to define. And perhaps it's not even needed. Basically, it is about understanding what it is. When we get to a certain place, certain point in our research, we would know it when it happens. That's our hope. So let's go instead into why transdisciplinary. And here are my arguments for that. There are some issues and problems that are just so complex that addressing them from one dimension alone or from a single perspective would mean that we leave out a lot of very important things. So, and then there's something to be said about the fact that scientists have, you know, limitation as well. We work under uncertainty. We deal with a lot of unknown. And so we can provide certain answers, but perhaps not all. So what we need to do is to draw from a broader range of knowledge holders. I call them lay experts, to recognize that there is not just a scientific knowledge, not just scientists that are experts. Fishing people, for instance, they're always my lay experts because they're the ones that have lay knowledge and their knowledge needs to be integrated. So from my understanding of transdisciplinary, there are at least two ways to think about this. One is what we call close transdisciplinary, meaning that it is sharing and building knowledge within and among scientists. And there's an open one, which means that scientists are actually now want to engage with fishing people and other lay public in order to really create the knowledge and the science. So it doesn't have to be that we need to include fishing people all the time in our transdisciplinary research. If we can extend and build and link and connect and be innovative among scientists, that would be, we would be already doing a good job. So the most important thing is about the process. This is what I learned. So it cannot be that scientists work on their own and then bring their results and then try to discuss that. That would be just a little bit of multidisciplinary. If they share a little bit, maybe that's interdisciplinary. But it is really about starting it together, defining the problem together, identify ways to address the problems together, and then work collaboratively in order to produce the outcomes. And through that process, we hope that there will be new theory, new methods, new tools, or even new discipline eventually that would emerge. Okay, so it's about moving away from your comfort zone, getting into something that you may be a little bit ambiguous about, but everybody would be so uncomfortable together, so you don't really feel like you're out there on your own. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in the context of small-scale fisheries, I think it does require this kind of approach in order to address some of the concerns. Here I would explain. Fisheries are the most diverse, complex, and dynamic system that I have come across in many, many ways for many reasons. And they come in various scales. I like to show this picture to suggest that, and you have seen that in your experience, I'm sure. Boats come in so many different sizes, right? And they could be tiny, they can be medium size, or they can be quite big. But it's not just about the biological system, the environment, and the operation alone that creates that complexity and challenges in governance of fisheries. For the most part, it is a lot to do with the fact that when you go from one place to the next, they are not the same. So people talk about fisheries almost as if there is one type. One, you know, when you mention the word fisheries, people have a different perception, different relation about what it means. So it creates, the word creates a certain image that is different from place to place. And what I like to argue is that when people talk about small-scale fisheries, most of the time they think about places like in developing countries, places in the south. And as you know here, we have small boats in Galicia and other parts of Spain. And so therefore, one thing that we need to make sure that people understand is that when we talk small-scale fisheries, it is also about the countries in the north as much as in the south. It also could be any environment, any aquatic environment. I have seen fishing taking place in the smallest water body. It can happen, right? So it is not just about the ocean. It can be the brackish system, it can be fresh water, it can be lakes, ponds, and also it's not just about harvesting, but it's also about culture. So aquaculture is part of that fisheries as well. So all those are part of that complexity and diversity and dynamics of the fisheries that we need to deal with. And then we add another layer of complexity when we started to look at the people involved in the fisheries. In many places, we think of men doing the fishing. Here in Galicia, there's a lot of fishing women, the mariscadores, right? They work on the shore, they collect shellfishes. And in some places, even children do involve in the fishing as part of that family enterprise and business. And it's not only about the fishing activities alone. It's also what happened after the fish land that requires a lot of examination. So the aquatic environment needs to be understood. The harvesting practices, all those diversity that I mentioned, need to be understood. And then the post-harvest activities, including the market chain, including the time before the fish gets to the consumer. There's so many things happening throughout that process. And also because of globalization, because of large-scale processes like climate change, it adds to that need to look at fisheries and small-scale fisheries in a different way. So my point is really about when we talk about fisheries, we need to be quite specific Are we talking small scale? Are we talking large scale? Are we talking what part of the fish chain? Are we talking only women doing the work, or men doing the work, or many people doing the work together? So those are the details that needs to be understood. And then at the end of the day, small-scale fisheries don't exist in isolation. They are closely linked with communities and other activities in the coastal areas. For the most part, when we go to coastal areas, we know there's fishing, we see tourism. We see other recreational activities, we see other development in the area. So it's becoming that multiple sectors, and it's a lot of embeddedness that happens in there. So what it means is that it requires a much broader lens. You cannot approach and understand and address small-scale fisheries challenges just by looking at it from a biological perspective, or from the sociological perspective, or from the economics perspective, or from the governance alone. You need as many people as possible to help out and really get together and start the process to figure it out how best to address this sector if we are concerned about their sustainability. So the point about this, behind all this, is of course the concern about the ecosystem health, the sustainable livelihood, the food security, the social justice. How to address all those problems when small-scale fisheries sectors are just part of a bigger set, and also have that integrated and connectivity with other things that are happening in the area. So my understanding is that what transdisciplinary research is trying to do, it's basically to go between those various disciplines, to go across that, and then to go beyond those disciplines all at once. I don't know about that. All at once really means exactly in practice, but it's a lot of learning by doing that is going to be required, I think, which adds to the fun part of doing research. But it is really about creating a holistic approach in order to address that complex societal problems in the way we talk about this. This is not a technical problem. It's a societal problem. It requires different solutions or different approach to arrive at solution if we can ever get there. Okay, so science therefore would not only inform but will transform the society. So it involves a bit of change and transformation in a very innovative way. So it's a big thing, a big way to think about how to approach research. But I think it's a good challenge. We need to push ourselves and the boundary a little bit in order to really recognize that for something as important as small-scale fisheries, for something as complex as that sector, we might need to go pretty big and bold. And I would explain a little bit what we have been trying to do. But before I go there, I wanted to just say, I guess this is what they're talking about. If we have a lot of that silos, which in disciplinary, so you can have things that may be happening together. Biology, oceanography might work more closely together. Sociology, anthropology might try, have more, closer connection, etc. What we would hope to do in transdisciplinary approach would be to make sure we go across and we go between and across and beyond, and doing that all at once. One day I will get a good graphic designer and they would do a pretty picture of this. This is just my own playground. Okay, so then of course a lot of this comes with challenges. Let's face it. We know it was already hard to do interdisciplinary research. What are you talking about? Now we need to be transdisciplinary. It's challenging because we are talking about a very uncertain direction and the process. There is definitely no one way to do it. So there's no cookbook, there's no formula. And then the process is uncertain, but worse is that the outcome is uncertain. After all this effort, is it really true that we're not going to get there? Can you live with that? So prepare for the failure, or accept the reality of it, right? So this doesn't work with your PhD student. I'm sorry, you do research, you need to achieve something. But once you finish, you can play and say, well, I failed. And prepare for that, right? It's more about preparing for the unexpected. We cannot control everything, okay? So there is a lot of debate about, are we watering down the science, right? And I think that's a legitimate and valid concern, because it seems that if you want to take this transdisciplinary approach, then where is the solid background that you can hang on to and feel good about? I mean, I can speak from my own experience, because I like to call myself an interdisciplinary scientist. And they said, well, that's very good, because why do you say that? I said, well, I have a marine science background, I have a fisheries biology background, I have a resource economics background, and I have a social and political science background. And even in my research, I do psychology and behavioral economics. So I have done quite a few things. I said, that's wonderful. It's very difficult to find someone with that kind of background. Okay, we would like to hire you in the position I am in, the Canada Research Chair in Natural Resource Sustainability and Community Development. So by the title, I'm supposed to be very interdisciplinary, and it's the Faculty of Arts that is going to hire me. But there was no department that was sort of claiming me, because they couldn't figure it out. Where would she go? So they were like, biology wanted me. And they said, you Faculty of Science, you're not supposed to want me. Let me just look in the Faculty of Arts and see where I could fit. And then there was a lot of discussion, because they still need to put me somewhere as a home department based on a discipline. It's like sociology, anthropology, economics, and etc. But then I found geography. And I said, that's the home. Because geography really is about the very interdisciplinary by the training. So that's where I'm comfortable being. So it's don't worry about being interdisciplinary. There's always a place where we can fit you. And transdisciplinary as well, I'm pretty sure. So we need to bear that, recognize the risk that then there might be a little bit of the alienation happening. There might be different ways that people, there's books and readings and codes and norms that it's going to be hard to try to fit. But it's a good challenge, I would still say. And we might be seen as risk, as trying to fix everything all at once, this kind of business of all at once. But I think we just need to recognize that that it is not really what we are trying to. What we are trying to do is not to fix all, but trying to offer perspectives and inviting collaboration to help address certain issues. And then, of course, the debate, the bottom line question is still there. Is there really a scientific need or value added? And this is actually the point that we're trying to provide evidence through our project, the Too Big to Ignore, to suggest that there is a real need for this kind of approach, and there is a value added. So I see whether I can convince you or not at the end of this. Here is what we did. We are doing. We proposed a project that is called Global Partnership for Small-Scale Fisheries Research. Too Big to Ignore. It's a 6-year project that is funded by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council of Canada. We are already in year 3 of the project, so we would expect already some outcomes. But it's a very big network, you will see, and so it is taking some time to get together and get started. Basically, when we started the project, there was a team of 62 scientists from 27 countries and with 15 partner organizations around the world. This includes FAO, that's one of our partners, and so that's intergovernmental. We also have more intergovernmental partners in the region, like Benguela Current Commission. We also have smaller partners, like working with fishing people, like Masifundisi in South Africa. We also have research organizations that are partners with us. And then we have organized ourselves into 5 regions of the world. Europe is one, then we have Latin America, we have Asia and Oceania, We have Africa, and then we have North America, which is 2 countries, US and Canada. Nobody likes to play with North America. They just wanted to stay, Mexico wants to be with Latin America for good reasons. Okay. So around the world, fisheries are different, right? There are parts of the world in Africa, it's very important, but they're not yet very advanced. In Asia, lots of fishing people, lots of advance in technology and innovation. Europe, we know there are small-scale fisheries, and not to the extent that you see in Asia and Africa, in Latin America, but they do exist. So those are what we are trying to capture, spread ourselves around the world and trying to do research in those places to provide evidence to suggest the concerns about small-scale fisheries and also the need for transdisciplinary research. We are called too big to ignore for a reason. Most of the time, small-scale fisheries are very marginalized in the political perspective, in policy, in economics, in geography, because they are remote, they spread out, they distribute against, they really sometimes take place, small-scale fisheries in very remote area, far from, center of the city and etc., far from the market. So, and they're not being recognized for their contribution to the society. We do believe that they make important contribution when you really understand what's happening in small-scale fisheries in the place. We know that they provide food, they provide job, they provide livelihoods, and they provide meaning to people that is beyond what is captured in the GDP, for instance. So we need to be able to elevate their profile so that people understand who are the small-scale fisheries, where they are, what they do, how important they are, so that we can argue against their marginalization in the national and international policies. So it is a really good time for small-scale fisheries in many regards, because there's a lot of interest in the past 5 years about this sector. Especially FAO is putting together the voluntary guidelines for small-scale fisheries that has been part of a long-term consultation, and it went through 2 rounds of negotiation, and it's going to be approved, I hope, at the next COFI meeting in June, this coming June. Okay, so then the last bullet point is about developing research agenda, research program that would address global food security and sustainability challenges in fisheries policy. And that part of research is the transdisciplinary that we are hoping to do. So we have this listed as our key objectives. We want to promote the recognition and understanding of the importance of small-scale fisheries. We want to explore the contributions to the economic growth and development in any location, what they contribute to in terms of environmental sustainability and stewardship and community resilience. We also recognize that they are very vulnerable to these changes, processes. So we need to recognize that and then trying to see what we can do to help minimize those vulnerability. We like to think about our work as contributing to encouraging policy discussion and information that could improve decision making about small-scale fisheries. And then we like to be able to do something to help enhance that capacity and knowledge both at the local and the global level in terms of research and governance. So big tasks, but we have a big team. And the team is growing, and it will be a very nice thing to invite more researchers and scholars, including students, to participate in the network. It's a very open network. You can join at any time you like, and then you should be able to see what we do and then benefit from the networking with lots of scholars interested in the same thing. Okay, transdisciplinary number 1 that we try to do. The project did not start out of a group of people thinking about what we needed to do. The project began, the idea about the project, I would like to call it, is a bottom-up process of identifying the problems. Why did we say we wanted to do all those things? It is not researchers that are interested. It's the people that told us that these are important issues. So as part of developing the proposal for the project, we already practiced transdisciplinarity by inviting this bottom-up, by incorporating this bottom-up process to identify the problems. So what we said we would do in Too Big to Ignore is based on this process. We had the first Congress in Bangkok on small scale, World Small Scale Fisheries Congress in 2010. We developed an online survey we call Top 100 Questions. We basically ask people what are the most important questions that we need to answer about small scale fisheries, and those are contribution from anyone because it's an online survey. But then not everybody has access to online or like to communicate that way. So we conducted regional consultations in different parts of the world so that we engage with the community and the fishing people, and we ask them these questions. What are the most important things to do? If we can get a proposal together and fund the research, what would be the kind of things that you think we should try to address? And those are what we receive from them. Okay, so based on all of those and also based on what's happening with the small-scale fisheries guidelines discussion about that, we came with this set of questions. It's a big 5 questions because the final consultation of what we're going to do in Too Big to Ignore took place in Africa. So we said, well, they have big 5. You know, we also would do big 5. And these are our big 5, right? So we were, because the program, the funding program was actually, there were 2 stages in a funding program. First, you send in a small idea, a concept note. And once you get past that level, you are invited to submit a full proposal. So we had about 8 months to develop that full proposal. And that's how those processes took place. And so we said, we didn't know when we submitted the concept note what we were going to do. We said we would do something about small-scale fisheries. And then they gave us time. So we came up with this big 5. So these are our main working groups, if you like, the thematic areas where we address. And we need to be a bit more poetic as we do this as well. So we said, look, we're going to do strengthening the base. What is it exactly? We're talking about economic viability. Fishing people, small-scale fisheries need to be viable to exist. So we need to know what options they have. We need to know how they go about their fishing practices, their operation, and for them to be viable. And then we need to also understand how vulnerable they are to those major processes. So that is about strengthening the base. They need to have that base to operate. But then we need to also broadening the scope to recognize that it's not just about what they contribute economically, but there's also other things that they do. Social contribution, societal importance, and the connection to the community. So we want to look at research that provides that lens to make sure that we capture all various levels and types of importance and contributions that small-scale fisheries make into the society. The third big 5 questions is about enhancing the stewardship. Now we know, as well as everybody, any kind of fishing, the minute it touches the water, interacting with environment, there will be impact. But then we have to figure it out, how to minimize that impact that small-scale fisheries cause. But more importantly, recognizing and acknowledging what they do to foster stewardship in their practices. So I'm hoping that this research part, this question, could really illuminate the various conservation efforts and stewardship initiatives that small-scale fisheries initiate and involve in. And then we like this one, defending the beach. And it's basically about what you may see around here. I mean, I've been observing every morning, look out my window and see what fishing people are doing when they're trying to land their catches and etc. And then for the most part, what we see are recreational boats in the same space. In other places, we have seen fishing people who need to land their catches on the beach, they would lose the access to the beach because hotels are being built. And they put the fence, and only for tourists that can walk across that beach. It's a lot of rights and access, physical space, and other, other issues about the rights to livelihoods that need to be looked at. And we need to defend the beach together with the small-scale fisheries, how to do that. And then the last one is about governance. Here we argue that there have to be different ways to think about institutions and principles for governing small-scale fisheries. The set of institutions, rules and regulations, the set of principles that we apply and employ to manage large-scale industrial fisheries do not apply to small-scale fisheries. We need to think about them differently. So those are the big 5 questions. So there are research working groups with team of students and researchers addressing those, and of course, being transdisciplinary would mean that we need to bring them back together in some way. We got 3 more years to do that. So, but the holistic research perspective we have, which is the interactive governance, that is really the one that we find that is integrative and holistic. It can really help bring those 5 different research teams together. Because in the lens that we provide to small-scale fisheries, it is about recognizing the diversity, complexity, dynamics, and scale issues, as well as looking at their interactions. So that means that we are already enhancing our understanding as we are applying this lens. But it is also about making sure that the public and private actors are able to interact to not only solve the problems, but also create opportunities that can then become viable options, that become future, that become sustainability for the small-scale fisheries. So there's a lot of ways that we can think of, and we employ this kind of perspective, which is very transdisciplinary, to help us understand and link and make connections with these government and other actors in small-scale fisheries, so that positive outcomes could happen. Okay, the way we look at this is about looking at governance challenges based on that overall quality. We know that it's the system that we need to be able to work with, which is the small-scale fisheries, from the natural and the social. We know that the set of organizations and groups that are doing this governing system, we know they interact. At the very minimum, we would need to recognize their characteristics in terms of diversity, complexity, dynamic, and scale. We know that some of those interactions can be present or absent. Some of them are more appropriate than others. Some are better as responding to challenges, and some perform better. We know that we need to recognize some of the images that various stakeholders have about the ecosystem, about the livelihoods. Is small-scale fisheries the last resort, or it's at the occupation of the poor? Those are the images that we need to work with. And then there's power issue, when you're trying to understand how different actors in the fishery system interact, or between government and fishing people. We need to recognize what the values are, what the norms and the principles underlying those behaviors. And then we need to recognize that some of those government policies or other regulations and stuff might be relevant, some of them are more effective, and some of them might create issues with justice. So those are all those various aspects of understanding the system, but they're all wrapped under the interactive governance. So with those big 5 questions and the interactive governance perspective, I think we could produce transdisciplinary research. And we are doing that as we speak. Okay, then we move into something about knowledge production and integration. How to deal with those various research and put them in a system where we can start to understand what's going on. And here I rely on information technology. And this is because this is an innovation in our world today. You can produce a whole bunch of theses, lots of papers, unless you put it somewhere where it can be accessible and integrated in a certain way, it almost loses the meaning. So What's happening here is about developing what we call information system for small-scale fisheries. Basically, it's a major database. It's going to be a web-based, online, just like the system that I think you're promoting here, providing access to, making it accessible to people. It is about working with data administrators, researchers, small-scale fishing people, general public, and policy makers. There are two ways to approach this development, and we are doing that in parallel with each other. We use a lot of existing data to drive this information system, so we go from the global level all the way down to as low as a small level as possible. But there's a lot of things that are happening at the local level that require that in-depth, thick description. So we need to do research at the local level and then contribute the data up. So we are doing this two-way approach to developing. So we rely on existing data to start us, and then we use local data to enhance our knowledge. And then we do this sort of putting information together so that it becomes an enhanced body of knowledge. This is our vision. You may have seen this. Daniel Pauly put together this paper to suggest that if you really want to understand what's happening in small-scale fisheries, we can compare them with what's happening in large-scale sector. For instance, we can look at the number of people employed, the annual catch, the kind of discards, the kind of waste, the kind of energy consumed. So he has put together a next column about small-scale fisheries. See, information about small-scale fisheries are really scarce, and I have been part of that, contributing to that process of enhancing our knowledge. So at best, we can make that comparative analysis. What we hope to do through Too Big to Ignore project and with our information system is to be able to do a little bit more, add information. In addition to the quantitative information, we also want to know who are these fishing people, where and how and why they fish, what contributions they make to the local community, in addition to revenues, the monetary benefits, what happens to their catches along the chain, the value chain, and then what roles they play in conservation and stewardship. So we're trying to improve the estimates about small-scale fisheries. At the same time, we're also trying to provide qualitative information. And if we do our job well, this is going back to the quantitative part. If we do our job well, we should be able to provide more insight when we are trying to do something like this, because we can get global landing data and map them out in this way. So say, around the world, where we have the largest amount of catches, and then you can see this kind of picture happening. What we would like to do is say, well, these are all landings. What if we can find information about small-scale fisheries? Would we see differences in terms of landings? Okay, so I should be able to do better than this, but this is all I can do, which is to click and click so that you can see the change. If policies are made based on this data, it would look one way. But if we can really examine what's happening in small-scale fisheries and present this data, policies will look very different. And that's the kind of information that we want to provide, in addition to this other qualitative information. This is not yet our final data, so don't look at the map too closely and start thinking that, is that so? I mean, those are based on what we know, but we were trying to improve that data and produce various types of maps and other outputs so that people can interact with that and then learn, because we have to do this, what they call drill down and scale up and all those things, the information technology stuff. Okay, then once we have that knowledge, and integrate it in a way, how are we going to make that work? How are we going to turn that into something useful? So we put in the fourth part of our project. It's about knowledge mobilization and capacity development. So we are developing what we call Transdisciplinary Fisheries Program, so that it become a module that university like Campus Del Mar, if you like, you can take what we produce, integrate that into your program. So next time you can offer that as part of the degree requirement. We would develop that for training, like formal training. We would also develop that as part of informal training. That means we can take the module into the community and work with the fishing people and other community members in developing that capacity that is required to do research about small-scale fisheries. We need all the help we can. That's what we believe. So everybody needs to help. If we know something, we work on it. If we don't know, somebody else knows. We're trying to enhance that knowledge through this kind of method. Okay? So at the end of the day, I think it's a bottom line kind of information that we need to recognize. We don't know yet what this transdisciplinary fishery science is going to look like. What we know is that we are contributing to that with our process. We have a global analysis that we would do. We would develop that information system that we talked about. We have the big 5 questions happening that would feed into that process, and then we're trying to mobilize that knowledge and build capacity towards that. So that is basically what we are trying to do, and to what extent we'll be successful, that remains to be seen. But I'm hopeful. I'm always optimist when it comes to things like this. And we still have 4 years to go at the end of the day. But here is an invitation, because we are going to bring the people involved in the project and others interested in small-scale fisheries to the 2nd World Small-Scale Fisheries Congress that will be held this year in September, right after the ICES meeting that you are hosting in Merida in Mexico. And we're calling these options and opportunities for small-scale fisheries, but we have a nickname for it as well, which is a transdisciplinary forum. By that we mean we are inviting fishing people to come to the Congress. So there might be 300 people at the Congress, and about 50 of them would be fishing people and communities and organizations working in small-scale fisheries, so that it become a platform that we can really exchange. And this is not about them learning from us alone. We're not going to be talking to them. We're going to be having conversation with the people. So I'd like to invite you to join us and check our website, toobigtoignore.net, and become members, and also participate in whatever activities we are doing. Thank you very much.